Hello, I'm Malcolm Thomas. I'm President-elect of INCOSE UK, and I'm here to introduce you to Jon Holt, who is our Technical Director, who's going to give you a bit of an insight into his role within INCOSE UK and what goes with that. So, Jon, tell us a bit about what you do as Technical Director of INCOSE UK.
Well, so thanks for the introduction, Malcolm. There's two main areas that I'm responsible for, and that's what we refer to as the technical publications and the technical services. So publications, they're the things that you would expect, such as the papers as the output from the ASEC, white papers as well that might come as a result of working groups, but also increasingly over the last few years our books that we now publish with proper ISBN numbers that are available, you know, where you would expect them to be available from, and that's increasingly becoming a large part of that. And as a result of the popularity of the books, so we've now got 10 titles in 3 different series going on, and we've got about another 10 in the pipeline at the moment. But as a result of that, we've set up a publications team, so I'm involved with running that as well as part of what I do. And it's a good indication of the way that things have evolved over the last few years. So when I took the role on sort of 3 terms ago, we didn't have any formal books being published. This is something that's taken time, but it's hitting a point now where we've got a bit of momentum, we've got a critical mass of books, and that's really turning out to be very, very rewarding. And it's very nice when, you know, we get the first copy of the book, regardless of who's written it, and you hold it in your hands, and it's a proper book, you know, with a price tag on it and an ISBN number, and you can pick it up and flick through it, and that's actually very rewarding, and it's quite a departure from us compared to what we would typically do. So obviously there's that, and a large part of that is getting the reviews done. So we've got an independent review process that's in place. So if somebody submits a book proposal, we've got standard forms for that. I arrange the reviewers. So I'll point out now, in all the reviews that we do, I don't actually do any of the reviews, but I find appropriate reviewers with the right competencies in the right area, and I arrange for them to do the reviews. I then collate the numbers and so on. It's quite time consuming, but it's very rewarding. So the review process is a large part of that, and we have variations on the review process. So you know, if a working group wants to publish a white paper, that also goes through a review process as well. So one thing we've introduced in the last few years is that there's no publication will be released by INCOSE UK without having gone through some kind of peer review beforehand, and that will be a minimum of 3 reviewers. So that's the main aspects of the technical publication side of things. And the other main side of things is the technical services. So for example, we 2 years ago, we formally launched our endorsed training provider service. That in reality took over 3 years to sort of get into play. You've got to bear in mind, we are volunteers, nobody's working on this full time, so things do take quite a long time, but that's up and running now. We're running it as a full professional service, so INCOSE UK makes not a great deal, but some money out of it, and it's setting up the services and the associated processes, then running the services and the associated processes. And again, similar to the way that we've got a publications team, we've also got a services team as well that we set up last year, and that just allows us to sort of get together and come up with our strategy for what's the next service that's going to be in the pipeline. So they're the 2 main areas that I'm directly responsible for. And I guess the other one that we actually work together on, Malcolm, as you know, is the event side of things.
Yes.
And of course, our flagship event is the ASEC, but then we've also got the smaller events. My main input as technical director, I think it's probably fair to say, is the ASEC, because I think you as you know, president-elect, you've got more to do with the running of the groups and those kind of events, but it's something that I'm still involved in. But I think the ASEC that's the big, obviously that's our flagship event, and that's the big one. Getting all the papers submitted, you know, but now bearing in mind the last few years we've had over 30 papers submitted, and we only select 11 plus 2 reserve papers typically. That's a lot of papers, that's a lot of reviewers. We have 3 reviewers for each paper. Each paper is double blind reviewed, so there's some upfront sort of redacting of information to do on that. Again, I don't get involved with the reviews on actually executing the reviews. I'm involved in the coordination and the the administration of those reviews. Again, quite time consuming, but very rewarding. The papers is the big time consuming thing there, but also the tutorials, the posters, and then the actual running of the event itself, which if you've ever been to one of our ASECs, may appear on the surface to be very smoothly run and to go off without a hitch and effortlessly. But as you will confirm, Malcolm, that's rarely the case. What you don't see behind the scenes, that's the real kind of pain involved with it. But again, enormous fun. But yeah, so they're the main areas really, I guess, that I get involved with. And then, coming up with any new ideas as well, taking them to council, obviously getting involved with council matters, but I'm also asked to, review other things, get involved with some of the other directors directly, and, put a technical spin on those. So that's that's the big picture, I guess, of what's involved.
That's excellent. That sounds like an awful lot. How much effort do you put into that? Because, as you say, these are volunteer roles that we're in.
It is, and it's different for every council member, but for mine it is quite a lot. So I would say average throughout the year, I would say the minimum for what I'm doing at the moment is a day a week minimum. But you have to bear in mind that's kind of seasonal, because when the ASEC's on, like now at this moment, we're recording this at the beginning of March, basically all the reviews, all the papers, the call for papers is about to go out. We'll get all the abstracts submitted. I've got to do all, so there'll be an awful lot of effort in the next couple of months coordinating the reviews and so on. As we get closer to the ASEC, the review side of things, obviously, as we down select the papers and they get accepted, that goes down, but then the coordination side of things goes up. So probably our quietest time is between it's sort of December, January and February, and the rest of the time it is, can be quite intensive. And it also depends on, how many books proposals we get put in as well. But I would say probably on average, realistically, it's at least a day a week that I have to commit. And again, that's on average. I'm not saying I do a full 8 hours each week on it. It's split across, each week I'll be doing an hour here, an hour there, and so on. I think that's important, because I think to do the role justice, you have to get some sort of buy-in from whoever pays your regular salary. I work for a small company, so I'm in more of a position to influence that. But that is quite a big factor, because it is time consuming. It does take a lot of effort, and you really do need the support of whoever you're working for. And, because you've got, apart from the council meetings, there's all sorts of other things that you need to get involved in that take time. There's lots of online meetings at the moment. But yeah, so at least a day a week, I would say that you need to have put aside on average to do this.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a reasonable amount of effort, isn't it? But I think, what would you say are the benefits of doing the job for an individual who's thinking about, should I stand perhaps to become technical director?
Well, I will point out first and foremost, there's no money involved whatsoever. You might get the odd night away in a hotel for the ASEC or whatever, or to go and visit, but there's no money or anything like that. You don't get any of your expenses paid, which is another, apart from the ASEC if you're technical director. But for example, council meetings and so on, you're relying on your company again to not only give you the time off to attend them, but also to pay for any hotels and travel that's involved. But having said that, I get a lot from the role. I've learned an awful lot more about INCOSE UK and also big INCOSE and the way that things work. As I said, when you get something like a book that arrives on your desk, a full printed one, that's very rewarding. I get to deal with members on a face-to-face basis, which is, again, can be very rewarding. The ASEC's a fabulous event, and again, you end up taking a prominent role in that. That can be very rewarding. On the downside, yes, whenever you're dealing with any kind of membership, the kind of queries that you get, some of them are very good and interesting, and others are less so. But so it's getting that balance right. But you've got to want to put the effort in. You've got to feel like you're getting a reward from just dealing with people and improving INCOSE UK as a member organisation. And I think in the I've been in this post now 3 terms. We've seen INCOSE UK change a lot. And I think, you know, I've contributed at least a small part towards that. And that is very rewarding, that we can look at where we are today with INCOSE UK. And for example, we can look at the books and say, well, I was heavily involved in that. We can look at endorsed training provider and I can say, actually, I was heavily involved in that as well. So it is very rewarding. There's a lot of effort involved, but it's got to be, you've got to be that kind of person that wants to do that. So.
Okay. I guess that leads into my final question is, why did you stand for the role in the first place? What was the initial motivation that made Jon Holt want to become technical director?
Well, I've been involved with INCOSE UK for many years. The first event I went to was in 1999, the infamous Brighton International Symposium, which some of the older members, which I've now become one of the older members, might remember. And I've been involved for many years, obviously writing papers, but also at the ASECs doing tutorials and that kind of thing. And I've always, you know, enjoyed all my interactions with INCOSE. So when the opportunity came up, I spoke to the previous technical director and I thought, well, actually, yeah, that sounds like this kind of thing I might enjoy. I had quite a long talk with the previous technical director, and you know, he told me, similar to what we're doing now, the good parts, the bad parts, and so on, how much time it would take. But yeah, so that's what it was, really wanting to get more involved with INCOSE UK, and bigger picture than that, just being involved in the general landscape of systems engineering in the UK and, you know, across the wider field. So it does give you opportunities to talk to different organisations with your INCOSE UK hat on. It gives you opportunities to get involved with other chapters as well. So I'm often asked to speak at different chapters and that kind of thing. So you know, you got to want to do that kind of thing, and I think it's also one of those roles where kind of the more you put into it, the more you can get out of it as well. But yeah, you know, they're the sort of things that I enjoy doing. You don't need to ask me twice to stand up in front of people for half an hour and talk to them. So you know, there's quite a lot of that involved. So.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope people find that enlightening and a bit of a nudge, perhaps, to think perhaps you could do this. Okay, thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Well, thanks, Malcolm, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah, cheers all.
What really sort of remains now is to ask, do people have any questions or comments that they want to make relating to the role? So I'll just give people a minute to think about this. The role itself is a 3-year role. It's at the ASEC at the end of day 1 of the ASEC, and then they formally take over the role on day 2 of the ASEC. And so, which is bearing in mind that if, you know, somebody new does take over, then on day 2 of the ASEC, they're in charge, essentially. There are some of the things that we do on day 2 of the ASEC, such as the summit, which is when we get people together and we run a sort of brainstorming session with them. But there's mechanisms in place already to take that into. Are all the procedures that you follow documented within INCOSE UK? Yes, they are. It's the simple answer to that. It can be challenging at times, because sometimes when you're dealing with some of the technical queries, particularly if somebody's put a lot of effort into producing, for example, a paper or a publication or something like that, and it doesn't get favorable reviews, you've then got to go back to somebody and explain to them why you're not going to be publishing their piece of work as it stands, and that can be awkward. Don't get me wrong, and that's not very enjoyable, because you know, people have put a lot of effort into these things. You know, they've written something, they've taken all this care and effort over it, and that can be very awkward. But there we go. Have I discovered or learnt anything that I didn't expect whilst in the role? I've learned so much about so many different things. I've learned so much about how INCOSE UK runs, how big INCOSE runs. I've learned a lot about what it is to run events, and you know, running events is the classic. They call it the swan, don't they? Where the way the event should be perceived is it's beautifully smooth and it's graceful and it glides through the water. We're the legs that are underneath that are running around screaming and tearing our hair out in the background. So that's very sort of insightful, seeing how that's done. But having been said, that's very pleasurable. But then you have to bear in mind that for things like the publications and the ASEC and things like that, the services, you know, the buck stops with you. So you know, it's not all fun and games. You have to bear that in mind. Sometimes you have to have difficult conversations with people, but it is overall, it's very enjoyable. I can guarantee you'll learn an awful lot about all sorts of different things, and interacting with the team as well. We've got a great team at the moment in terms of the council and the support team from the secretariat. And it's really sort of a joy to work with. I'll say most of them. It's really a joy to work with all of these people as well. So as I say, it is rewarding on that level. Right. So any upcoming changes with the role with IFSI? So when we move to, if and when we move to IFSI, the Institute for Systems Engineering, I think if anything, the role is going to become more demanding. Okay, so as I said, what I've spoken about is what we've said so far, but with IFSI there comes more responsibilities with us being a professional engineering institute. So one example of that is actually the endorsed training provider scheme. Now that's something that's been in the pipeline for quite a few years. So bear in mind, it probably took about 4 years for that to come to fruition, because we don't meet that often. We're all volunteers. Everything moves at kind of a glacial speed when it comes to developing new products and new services. But actually, that's an important part of being a professional engineering institute, is you have to provide training for the members. What you also have to bear in mind is that ultimately we're a member organisation, so everything that we do must be driven by the members, and it must be transparent to the members as well. So, and this takes us back to things like having the processes in place and making these transparent to people. If anybody does want to sort of question what we're doing, we have to make everything transparent, and that's something that we've been putting in place for the last few years anyway. And now we're becoming IFSI. I think that's going to be even more important. So I think we're open to a lot more sort of comment and judgment by the other professional bodies, you know, by government and so on. And there's a lot more responsibility that's coming with it. So I can only see the role increasing in terms of the number of things that you do and the level of responsibility that we have. Okay, would you say it's possible to endorse such a position while having a job in industry at the same time? You've got to be careful, because you've got to be careful for things like conflict of interest. And I've got to be particularly careful in my position, because my main job is I'm an independent consultant, and I'm always going to be open to criticism that people say I'm doing things for my own dark ends. So for example, my particular area of expertise is model-based systems engineering. So the second that a paper goes through to the ASEC that's based on model-based systems engineering, you know, there will be not many people, but there'll be 1 or 2 people that say things like, oh, funny how model-based systems engineering papers are suddenly popular. Well, it's a popular area. So it's another reason why we need to make sure we have these processes in place, and that we are transparent. Okay, this is absolutely crucial to everything that we do. We've got to be able to hold ourselves up as sort of paragons of virtue, as it is within the field. And we are open to criticism about conflicts of interest. And as I said, because of my current role, I'm an independent consultant. I do things like training. You know, I'm an author as well. I'm always going to have that criticism leveled at me. And so it's even more important then to make sure that you can do it. You've got to make sure that in the job that you're in, and again, you've got to talk to your employee as well. I mean, I'm a director of a small company, so in that sense, it's easier for me, but in another sense, it opens me up to more criticism. But you've got to make sure that one, your company is prepared to let you do it, that they'll allow you to allocate that much time to it, that they'll fund the traveling and the you know, the accommodation and so on to attend these different events, and also that there won't be a conflict of interest between what you're going to be doing in INCOSE UK or in IFSI and your organisation within itself, and that's where you've got to make a judgment call. And I think that's why anybody that puts themselves up for a council member role has got to be a professional. And this is one of the reasons why I say you've got to be at sort of CEng level, or ideally fellowship level. It's not just the technical aspect of that, but it's the professional aspect of that. You've got to be professional about this. You've got to be impartial between things, because you will have criticism leveled at you regardless of how you do your job, and that's a natural part of the job that you have to accept. But yes, it's a really good question. You've got to make sure that it is not necessarily in alignment with your company's goals, but it's certainly not out of alignment with your company goals, if that makes sense. Okay. Okay, well, in that case, I think that's been a really good set of questions we've had from people there. Hopefully, you've got something out of that. If you've got any further questions, and please, if you can address them either to me, Technical Director, or ideally through the Secretariat, that way we've got a bit of an audit trail there. If you've got any more questions or queries, please feel free to contact either me or the Secretariat regarding that, and we take it from there. So all that leads me to do is to thank everybody for joining us, and thank you for your interest, and thank you for the questions. And I look forward to seeing you at future INCOSE UK events. Okay, thank you, everybody.